All right, this is the Fit Mess Podcast. Thanks so much for listening. We talk about all things AI and how it can either completely fuck up or really help your life when it comes to your health and your wellness. Jason, you and I, we talked about a similar topic a few weeks ago, talking about how doctors use AI, even though most of them don't even trust it to begin with. So why shouldn't the rest of us do the same thing, jump on the bandwagon and try and figure out what the hell's going on in our heads and our bodies with this fancy new tool that we're all getting used to? And you and I were supposed to talk about this a few days ago, and when we were sort of kicking the idea around over text, I mentioned that I'd read a bunch of articles about how people are using it for therapy. And so I got curious. I was in a bit of a slump, having some rough times. Just fully upfront, like I'm a new assistant coach for my kids' softball team, and I watched her pitch her first game and just got annihilated. And it killed me. Like as her coach, as her dad, like it took a couple days to bounce back from that. And I literally was like, okay, AI therapist, get me through this. And so I started asking it all these questions. It was nuts. Like I've been in therapy for a long time, and the questions that it asked me literally, like I went in real dumb guy, real like basic level. Hey, AI, be my therapist. And it's like started asking me questions and I got
okay.
And it started asking me like these really introspective questions about like why I was feeling the way I did. And perhaps I was being a bit hard on myself and all these things that like my therapist has said to me for years. And I was blown away. I was like, wow, like that's really cool. But then it also like gave me actionable steps, not only like, go write in your journal or whatever, but it was like, what would you do to be a better coach next time? And I was like, oh, I would do some more drills. And it was like, perhaps try these drills. Like it had softball drills to take to the lesson. So like my therapist wouldn't have that, right? They would go, oh, go Google some ways to be a better coach. It was so profound that I actually did it for a few days and ended up like coming up with new ways to journal, new ways to do things. It's mind-blowing how much this can be used as a massive tool to help your mental health that I kind of was poo-pooing and laughing at before trying it myself.
Yeah. I mean, that's legit. So as a former little league softball coach, I would have loved to have had this tool as opposed to sitting there doing the assistant work and, essentially playing cage mom and doing cheers in the dugout with the girls and running a batting list order. Maybe actually know how to play softball, and maybe the AI could have helped me.
Right.
Alas, it was not available then. So yeah, I mean, I could definitely see how that would happen. And like, I don't think it's a substitute necessarily for regular human interactions, but when you're talking about what it really does is it helps you organize your thoughts and organize your questions in a way that makes it easier to get through to the truth of the topic and the truth of the subject. And it cuts down the noise that you have going on in your own head to try to find those pieces. Now, it's awesome because one, it can make things less confusing and it can organize information in a way that makes it much more palatable for you as an individual. The other side of that is that it's giving you information that's structured in a way that it thinks is useful and helpful for you. And by it, whatever told it how to respond in those things. And the way these learning models normally work is they have basically humans that come in and augment and look at responses as they come through and say, oh yeah, this looks like the best response, or this does not look like the best response. And ChatGPT does that to me all the time because I'm part of their beta sign-up program for different pieces. So it's fantastic because it gives you that kind of power and enables you to do those types of things. It's maybe a bit dangerous because it definitely enhances the potential for us to all fall into the Dunning-Kruger trap. I'm thinking we actually know what the fuck we're doing, when really we don't. What we're doing is we're using something to organize our thoughts and feed us information that we respond to. And most of us just want it to say, do this, take this pill, do this thing that's relatively easy, because hard work is just that. It's hard work. So at some point, we have to make the delineation between is what I'm doing here with this virtual therapist in this chat GPT realm enough, or is it kind of my starting point? And like you said, you've been in therapy for years and it asked you questions over the weekend that were as in-depth and as interesting as what it took you years to go through in therapy. And I don't think you would have been able to unearth that if you hadn't previously gone through therapy. So the layman looking at this reading this would have been like, well, fuck yeah, it's like search the internet. Well, of course, because I can put in a question, the internet has back a response to me, and nowadays the top of line is of course an AI response. But then there's several subjects that like relate below that. And when you look at the compendium of information that's actually there, it really is like a choose your own adventure novel. And when you start thinking about your mental health as gamifying things, and you start looking at your physical health as gamifying things, it's really, really useful from a productivity perspective because you can work backwards and look at these different actionable steps and actually show measurable improved performance. So, we've talked about it before, all these different metric wearable devices, they give you that same kind of level of interaction. And, I spent time to build a company to do this, to make it work. But the mental health side of it has similar types of challenges and stretches. The problem is that there's not really a way for you to go through and wear a wearable that says, today you're happy.
Right.
So this becomes that kind of subjective feeling of your own because, well, biometrically, you might look great, like you're calm, relaxed, and mellow. You might actually be depressed and you might be this calm, relaxed, and mellow because you've been laying in bed all day watching reruns of, you know, uh,
Right.
yeah, the
Cheers. My go-to would be Cheers.
yeah, exactly. Maybe not MASH. But that's kind of the thing is that like the way that your body reacts and the way that your nervous system reacts, certainly they're tied together, but the way the signals actually represent something as far as measurable metrics goes is very, very difficult. So a tool like ChatGPT, where you could actually journal in it and say, today I felt like this. And then if you compare that and overlay that with your other biometric data, you're actually going to be able to get a much better understanding of how these things affect you over time. So like a good night of sleep, most people find that if they get a good night of sleep, that they tend to feel better and are more productive. Like it's not rocket math, right?
Yep. Yep.
But if I got all the biometrics that said I got a good night of sleep, but I woke up and I still didn't feel good and I still felt down and depressed or just blase because I have some other underlying condition going on, nothing's going to tell me that. Like I got to ask questions to try to get to the answers to those pieces. And that's what this really comes down to is that it's up to us as individuals to advocate for ourselves. And the way that we advocate for ourselves traditionally is we say, I don't feel good. I'm going to the doctor and say, doctor, blah, 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 blah. And the doctor says, yes, take this and you'll feel better, or do these things and you might feel better. The problem that we run into is that doctors themselves, typically speaking, when we go and see them, they're not as invested in our health as we are. So because they're not as invested in our health as we are, they're not as likely to try to keep us motivated and on task and on track. So we supplement that with other like commercially available tools or other pieces out there, apps or these kinds of things. AI is just another advancement of this and just another repurposing of these functions. And if you look at all the tools out there that do this shit today, they're all using AI and they're using it to either get rid of people, correlate data, or both. And the idea is they're trying to make these things much more focused and much easier to execute on because the signal to noise ratio of life is just high. And using AI to do that, I think is actually quite healthy. There is a downside.
Of course, there is. The thing that I thought was so great about it was that like you said, this is not a replacement necessarily, but it's a hell of a stopgap between appointments. Or if your insurance is only going to get you in the office so many times or in the virtual call so many times, it's a great tool to go to in the moment when it's like, I'm maybe not crisis, if you're in crisis mode, AI might not be the way to go. But if you're like, you know what, I got to get out of this. I got to sort through this. Like I said, the kinds of questions that it made me ask were fantastic and really helped me through that slump. But then when I got a little more clarity, I was thinking about just like my journaling practice and how it feels very automatic and very like I check the boxes. I did the journal today and I don't really feel like I get anything out of it. And so I asked it to help me come up with a way to improve my connection to the feeling of gratitude, right? Like not just I'm grateful to have a
That's
warm home.
brilliant.
I was like, how
Yeah.
do I connect to the feeling? And the prompts that it gave me, like as I was filling in my journal following these prompts, like I was getting emotional, like really connecting with the feeling. And I was like, a robot taught me how to feel this in a way that I haven't been able to on my own in a really long time.
Dude, have
So
you seen Wally?
yeah, no, I know. It's exactly that. It's
You know?
exactly Wally.
Or
Yes.
what's that new one, like the wild robot? Like
Oh my God. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
fucking cried in all of them.
Seriously. Seriously. But I just thought like, how many books have I read about how to journal? How many times have I searched like how good journaling prompts and three things that you're grateful for? Like, but like the way that it dialed it in to like find the feeling and sitting with that feeling and writing about like I won't bore you with the details of it, but just to get that connection from just asking a robot what to do better was so powerful. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. No, I mean, you brought up a good point there too, though. Like, um, people in crisis, an actual like real legit mental health crisis. Um, it's highly likely that the person on, like a suicide hotline probably has a prompt engineer or a prompt writer, an
totally.
AI prompt, but an AI prompt actually transcoding the call, reading it, and saying, here are possible answers for you. Here are possible paths that you can take to try to make these things more effective. Because I'm sure as an individual, every time these people listen to it, they're probably getting swept up in the story and the emotion of it, at least to some degree. And the things that they might miss, the AI might catch. It's like having that secondary set of ears listening in to try to find the best path forward. Because again, this is, augmented intelligence. That's really what we're using it for. And we're using it to augment our own mental intelligence as well and our own mental awareness. If you if you think about it in those terms, this thing is great. We should use it. Everyone should have access to it. There shouldn't be a cost barrier to it. Like this should just be part of regular mental health. The downside is that it actually is not cheap. I mean, your mental health session with ChatGPT from an overall resource utilization perspective is probably quite high because you're using a lot of GPU and LPU cycles. But also, it is even still relatively low cost, and they subsidize that by selling something of yours, which is your data and which is the information about you. So as you're giving it more information, as you're telling it more about you, it's quite possible it's building a profile on you. And that profile could be this person has mental health issues. These are the things that affect them this way. This is how you effectively target them with advertising. These are the things you want to send to them so they can actually buy them and actually make money off of them. Like this is all the nasty reality of living in an e-commerce environment. And really we've gone from, this idea of democratized capitalism into economic feudalism because you wind up with these different kingdoms of relative ownership of these data principles. And, ChatGPT is one of those. So is Amazon, so is Microsoft, so is Facebook. Like these are all walled gardens of information sets to take these data pieces and try to make sense of them. And the kingdoms themselves share and sell your data back and forth between each other. So just be aware that this might be going out there, and that might be a thing. And
Well, and yeah,
yeah,
a bunch of the articles I was reading were like highlighting like Gemini has no HIPAA rules, right? Like so
right,
whatever you tell it about your health conditions, your mental health, whatever, like that's not locked in the doctor's safe, right? Like you are sharing that willingly in a relatively public way. So, you certainly want to be careful, but when it's like, hey, I'm feeling sad because I feel like a shit assistant coach on a softball
right,
team, there's relatively low risk there, other than I'm probably
yeah,
going to get sold a lot more softball shit in my Facebook feed. But otherwise,
right. Like, and that might not be a bad thing.
it might not. It might not.
You might actually need that DeMarini LX bat
That's
for
right.
your daughter.
I
You
am
might need
seeing.
a
I'm seeing the rope bat a lot. The rope bat is the one that I keep getting.
exactly.
Yeah.
You might need to buy a $500 bat to make yourself feel better as a coach. And if for some reason the coaching doesn't work, you can blame the bat.
That's right. I'll totally blame the bat for not doing what it was supposed to do.
I have like $2,000 in bats in my garage for my two kids playing softball.
Oh my God. I might have to come shopping because we're looking for a new bat.
I don't think they're any good at this point. They kind of wear out.
All
Yeah.
right.
Well, you're
One of
welcome
the
to.
things that I did read that the many doctors, at least in the American Medical Association, were talking about that were concerning is the way that these AI tools sort of gather all of this information. So we used to just be Dr. Google and read a bunch of links. So now AI does that for us. It reads all the links, combines all the information together. I loved this one quote because it talked about the stuff that gets cut out of all that as it's sifting through and finding the most important information. And it says, even if the source is appropriate, when some of these tools are trying to combine everything into its summary, it's often missing context clues, meaning it might forget a negative. This doctor says it might forget to use the word not. So a great example is somebody asking what to do for a kidney stone, and Google AI told them to drink urine. The guidance was probably to drink lots of fluids and then assess your urine intake. not to actually drink urine. So it's important to verify the information that that the AI tools generate for you.
Yeah, I mean, the first time drinking your own pee is probably not so bad, but you know, if you keep recycling it, I've seen enough movies on the topic that it could be problematic.
Fool me once.
Right? Pee on you?
Be on you.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Like, we want to rely on these tools, right? But we also don't want to be solely reliant on these tools. It's a give and a take, and it's a balance. Honestly, it's like anything else. You're trying to find the 51% median marker. You're trying to be better than, you know, at least half. It's just this aggressive mediocrity to try to actually get a win and a victory in some of these spaces. We're trying to find these pieces. And you bringing up, it being a stopgap between you and being able to talk to your actual therapist. I mean, that's a great idea. The other piece about this is that the way that you look at these data sets, and if you look at the information that's there, and you can start journaling and like adding your journal to your chat GPT, like, hey, here's my journal for the last like year. Am I trending towards happiness or am I trending towards something else? Like, what are you actually seeing when I go through this? How is this reading? Because really what you're talking about doing with journaling is creating a narrative. And it's the narrative and the story that you're telling yourself over a protracted period of time. And ChatGPT actually does do a really, really good job of looking at the intent focus of actual words. And by tokenizing every statement that's inside of it, it can see if you're actually getting, if it looks like your intent is more or less positive or negative. And there's a lot of variation in that, right? Like you might sound more abrupt because you're doing more work and you don't have time to journal as much, or you're more tired, or, you know, a few days a week, you have a little bit of extra time and you're going to make things 30% longer because you're going to spend more time clicking on those things, or you've discovered something new, voice to text, and you're going to talk these things in. Like these are all marker posts that require human analysis in the regular world to go through. ChatGPT is enabling individuals to do this with their own data sets as opposed to data experts, which is how we do it today. So the idea of, having these data scientists be able to go through and pour through massive amounts of information and then provide a summary and information and next steps and actions and really analysis. ChatGPT gives that to you as an individual, which is fucking rad. It's also terrifying because there are some people that shouldn't have this kind of information analysis because they're not going to be critical in the way that they actually use it, and they're not going to be their own safety net, and they're going to wind up becoming their own cautionary tale. And there seems to be plenty of that has occurred with other technology trends. And if you look at the way that we're starting to kind of try to absorb and understand mental health eh, as a discernible concept, not just within the way that we interact with people in the real world, but the way that we interact with people online, and you start looking at how these things kind of mix together, the dividing line between the actual value and benefit of the data that you're producing and putting online versus the data that you're actually producing in real space, that curve is going to, or that ratio is going to get wider. Like your online data and your online presence and your online who you are, that's going to become who all these virtual tools that you interact with think you are. And when you approach things over time, it's going to start using that as the bias lens of how it actually views you. And over time, this shit's going to make it into your doctor's office, and it's going to make it into your mental health clinic office. Like it's going to happen, and it's going to make it to your insurance company, and they're going to start using it to do what insurance companies do to say, you have a pre-existing condition.
Yeah.
Like you think you suck at softball. Therefore, obviously
You're
you would have
right.
eaten, therefore you would have obviously eaten 3 extra donuts every day. It makes perfect sense.
Yes.
Yeah, because they're going to make up bullshit to make it justifiable. But this is just the reality where we live, and we can either embrace it or we can try to shun it. But no matter what, you're going to be affected by it one way or the other, whether it's passively or actively. And I, for one, am going to actively involve myself with it and fuck around with it because I think at the end of the day, it's going to at least have some value, and that value might be a positive for me, or at least an understanding what the negatives look like, so I can know what to avoid and how to make those pitfalls actually things that I'm not going to draw myself.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking myself out of my own argument that I was about to make, but like the idea that like companies are farming this information and using it for evil, like that's nothing new. We're just perhaps giving a little more detail and a little more information than we used to, where we used to ask a question and then search, click the first 10 links and read them. Cool. Now everyone knows what the 10 links are that I clicked, but they don't necessarily know what I'm doing with that information as much as maybe they are now. Your point though about the person who maybe can't get out of their own way and is going to like screw themselves over in this process, this isn't going to help their case. I was reading an article today that it was this Israeli study that was done to compare how AI diagnoses patients versus real actual doctors. And this study was done, and then actual doctors reviewed the results of both side by side, and they found that the AI recommendations rated as optimal in 77% of cases versus 67% when it was an actual doctor diagnosing these people. So like literally the patient would come into the office, go through this AI doctor process, and then from there go and talk to the doctor, share all that information again. Same experience, one with a robot, one with a person. The robots got it right 77% of the time. Doctors got it right 67% of the time.
I bet a robot did that analysis.
I bet it did. I absolutely bet it did. It totally cheated.
He totally did.
But that's crazy to me that an independent, doctor would look at both and find that like, holy shit, like it knew enough in those cases. And I mean, I think it's also treating like very common stuff. It wasn't looking at like, user specific
Yeah.
medical records, stuff like that. But like, that's pretty, terrifying and awesome.
Yeah. And the more data you give it, the higher likelihood that it's going to have that it's going to be accurate and correct. I mean, it can actually look at visual data now. Like there's uh, Philips and all these other companies out there are using AI and ML to go through and do image diagnostics. They can actually try to track things down faster, which makes perfect sense, right? Like, does this thing look like a tumor? Yes. Does this thing look like it's benign or cancerous? Is it moving in these directions? How do these things change over time? It can do a lot of those pieces, and because it actually has better memory recall than the human brain, and it's more accurate, it will give you better contrasting ratios because human memory fucking sucks, and we know that, and it's manipulable and malleable based upon different situations, where AI memory is pretty atomic. Like it stays intact and it can recall those things with a much greater level of accuracy because it can actually open up the image and recheck again. Where humans, they might be like, oh, I remember this. I don't need to reopen that image again, and just be totally wrong. So, I mean, and there's also the accessibility of it, like their ability, the AI's ability to access information and pull it in. They don't have to open it up and run it through a visual cortex. They're not, worried that the doctor changed their prescription, so now they see things differently. Like, there's all kinds of reasons these things are better, but it doesn't take away the value of having human review of this data. I think what we're going to find over time is that we're going to use this to become a much better sorting mechanism, or a much better filtering mechanism to try to get to the truth faster. And what we're going to wind up with is homogenization of information and how things are actually being represented and understood, which means, you know, Kevin, Doug, Bob, James are going to be put into these buckets of things. And Kevin, Bob, and Doug, both have a cold. And James has, it looks like, the avian flu. But something new's come out and nobody's going to track that because they don't have a bucket for it. Or they're going to have a bucket called other. And they're going to try to keep these things as separated as possible. But it's always going to be about intent focus and how much we can get out of it. And finding novelty. That's one thing that AI is actually really shitty at. Like, it's good at finding things when they don't fit into a pattern. It's not good at defining this thing with a new pattern once it breaks out of those pieces, because it's not making shit up in the same way. And what we've discovered is that when we tell it, all right, go ahead, like turn up the p-value and the I-value is really, really high, and it starts hallucinating, which is what it does, and it gets high and starts spitting out responses. Wildly inaccurate. And like, it's not like there's a
Well,
like there's
it
an
doesn't
exact
have
ratio.
imagination. It lacks. Humans have imagination. It does not have imagination. It's connecting dots. It's taking existing knowledge and connecting dots, where we're able to somehow see things that aren't there and identify that, oh, this is something new, and to start to explain what it is.
Well, and I would argue that it connects dots, and when you tell it to hallucinate and you tell it to be creative, it doesn't have the ability to go, oh, I'm going to try a little bit to be creative, and I'm going to keep most of this stuff in check. It just goes, okay, and just starts throwing shit at it. Like, it throws a wig on and a clown nose and some big floppy shoes, and like, now I guess we're going to do this, and like runs out to go try to make this thing happen. That's kind of the difference. Like, you can tell a regular human, hey, 98% of what I do is this pattern and it's solid and like these things don't go through, but this 2% that I'm going to experiment with and play with and try to use some logic and reasoning around to try to see if this thing's legit. AI doesn't really have that kind of nuance just yet, but it's getting there.
Yeah.
And eventually it will. Now, whether it's going to be completely and totally replace the human experience, no, because it's not bound by the same physical inputs and outputs that we are. Like, it doesn't have a visual cortex that may or may not make me feel like I'm warm because I see the sun, even though the temperature hasn't changed and no sunlight's hitting me, but I suddenly have a psychosomatic approach where I'm feeling different. Like, it doesn't do those things. It doesn't have the same kind of interactions. It doesn't have the same type of neural network layout. Like, we're just different. But that doesn't mean it's not a really, really good tool to optimize things and try to make things better.
Yeah. So I think the lesson here is find the balance between human interaction and some of this, and how it can all work together. Don't completely replace the human interaction with your doctor, your therapist, your friend, for God's sake. But it's certainly a valuable tool, and one that I know I'm going to use. You have to go. I have an appointment with my online therapist, so I should go as well. So a good conversation. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back in about a week at thefitmess.com. If you found any value in this conversation at all, please do share it with somebody who may benefit from it. The links to do so are at thefitmess.com. We'll see you in about a week.
Thanks, folks.
We know this podcast is amazing and it doesn't seem to lack anything, but we need a legal disclaimer. Prior to implementing anything discussed in this podcast, it is your responsibility to conduct your own research and consult your physician. You should assume that these knuckleheads don't know what they're talking about, and they're not liable for any physical or emotional issues that occur directly or indirectly from listening to this podcast.